Imagine Martin Luther King Jr. not able to deliver his civil rights speeches because it was deemed as harmful speech. Or the women's suffrage movement of the 1920s could not get the right for the women to vote because their speech was also deemed hate-filled or harmful. In many countries across the world, it is a sad case that they do not have the right to freedom of speech. But in the United States, we have the luxury of freedom of speech. Our founding fathers made sure they put this in our Constitution that every generation after, for now more than 200 years, would have this privilege. Well, what in the case does free speech, should its free speech still be in contact when it harms others? Yes, free speech is free speech. Our founders meant it that way when they wrote it in the Constitution. There are already some existing limitations to the freedom of speech, and free speech is an important pillar to our democracy. The First Amendment of the Constitution states, Congress shall not make no law restricting on established religion, or prohibition the free exercise therefore, or abridge the freedom of speech or of press, or the right of the people to peacefully to assemble and to petition the government. Why did our founders place the First Amendment first? Well, they placed it first because they deemed it the most important thing. They placed it in the first 10 amendments, which they named the Bill of Rights, because every American should have these basic rights. They also made the First Amendment due to the oppression caused by the government of Great Britain before the Revolution. And that's what our founders and our forefathers fought for and won, to give us the freedom of speech. Now, according to the HG Legal Resources, there are already some limitations to the freedom of speech. These include control regulation, fighting words, obscenities, child pornography, libel and slander, crimes involving speech, threats, violation of copyright rules, conduct request, and commercial speeches. Well, there have already been multiple free speech cases brought before the Supreme Court. Johnson versus Texas, where the Supreme Court overturned that burning the flag is not a terroristic act. But the two I'm going to explain, R.A.V. v. City of St. Paul in 1992 and Virginia v. Black 2003, are two of the most important free speech cases the Supreme Court has seen since Johnson versus Texas. They both include cross-burning. In the case of R.A.V. v. City of St. Paul, the City of St. Paul set up an ordinance that the Supreme Court later overturned. The state of Virginia set up a law which the Supreme Court then later overturned. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote in dissent in Virginia v. Black 2003, and he states, and I quote, "This statute prohibits only conduct, not expression. And just as one cannot burn down someone's house to make a political point, and then seek refuge in the First Amendment, those who hate cannot terrorize and intimidate to make their point." In this case, Clarence Thomas got it right. Cross-burning should be added to some of these limitations on free speech. But I still strongly believe that free speech is free speech. Free speech is a huge pillar to the democracy that is America. Like I said in the beginning, what if Martin Luther King Jr. would not have been able to give his civil rights speeches? Well, Martin Luther King Jr., his speeches were deemed hate-filled because he was put on the FBI terrorist watch list. His speeches, because he has the right to freedom of speech, led to the Civil Rights Acts of 1964 and then further on acts. The women's suffrage. Their speech was then deemed harmful or hate-filled speech because they wanted the right to vote. But because they had the freedom of speech, their actions led to the 19th Amendment, which now give women the right to vote. And then on today's college campuses, where we've seen many cases that conservative speakers are not being allowed to speak because their speech is being deemed harmful or hate-filled. But it's because their freedom of speech that they're allowing to give their speeches on campuses. According to theblaze.com, There is a painting out in the University of Alaska in Anchorage depicting Captain America holding the decapitated head of President Donald Trump. Yes, this is a form of harmful or hate-filled speech that I see it as, but yet it is still free speech. It is an obligation that every American holds dear to their heart, and it should something we should continue to fight for every day if we want to continue to be the democracy we are. Thank you.